Hello, everybody. How are we doing? It is Dave. What is it?
It is Thursday.
It's banjo time, Dave.
That's what it's banjo time. That's what it is.
That's where we're going today. Trying a different intro. How you doing, sir?
Trying to coax you into something. I'm doing well.
Trying to lure you in, trying to get you to take the bait on that one, but you did not fall for it. But that's okay. That's okay. You doing well?
Yeah, doing well. Doing very well.
Excellent. Ready for this awesome show?
Yeah, that'll be fun.
I think it's going to be fun too. So hello to everyone who's joining us live. And of course, anyone who is watching from home on repeat, which of course is immediately after the episode finishes airing. It will be available on YouTube and on the Deering website. Such is the joy of modern technology. And a quick reminder as well, the audio versions of all of our Deering Live episodes, if you're not able to tune in and watch the whole thing, you can listen to them audibly, if you wish, on all your favorite podcasting networks, Spotify, Google, I think Apple have something similar. I wouldn't know, but that's a personal thing.
The small company.
This other small company out there, I don't know. So yeah, do be sure to check them out. You can listen to them while you're driving or while you're on the bike in the gym or doing whatever you want to do, including today's episode will be up there in just a couple of days. The other thing I wanted to bring up really quickly, for all of you in the US, for all of you outside the US, I apologize, but in the US, if you buy an artisan good time banjo in the month of November, you will be entitled to claim a free gig bag courtesy of Deering Banjo Company. So do check that out online at deeringbanjos.com/free gig bag 2023. Also been asked to mention that next week's guest is none other than Mr. Rex McGee, who some of you may know. That's going to be an exciting episode as well. Dave, you know Rex a little bit, right?
Yeah, I met him at, I've known his name for a long time, but I met him at IBMA this past year. Yeah. And yeah, he's a fantastic banjo player. And
teacher of Mr. Ryan Kavanaugh as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Yep. Absolutely. Well, should we bring in our guest today in just a second?
Let's do it.
All right. Well, our guest today is a prominent 5-string banjo player hailing from the Boston area. Beyond his remarkable banjo performances on the Boston scene, he's also renowned for his expertise in banjo setup and holds a profound knowledge of the instrument's history and intricacies. This promises to be a captivating conversation about all things banjo, so please bring him in, Mr. Gabe Hirshfeld. There he is. Hey, Gabe.
Hello.
How are you?
Oh, I'm doing all right. I'm just sitting here getting ready to talk about banjo. So my favorite thing. So
you definitely came to the right place.
whatever you want to know, I'll do my best.
Well, we're looking forward to hearing everything, and I'm sure we'll invite everybody who's watching to drop some questions in the chat. If you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, please go ahead as we go. But as is tradition, I think we'll invite you to play a little something at the top. What do you think?
Sure. Yeah.
Something?
So I've been doing a lot of tune writing recently. By recently, I mean over the past few years. So maybe that's
Recent.
not recent, but so here's one I wrote probably 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, uh, somewhat recently. But I really like other tunings, and this double C tuning is quite nice. So
Very
this is
cool.
one I wrote in double C. It doesn't have a title yet. Maybe it will someday, but here it is.
Really nice.
So now I'll just get it out of this tuning because I shan't be using it again.
So what tuning were you in?
That was double C tuning. So I was taking the fourth string and lowering it to C, and then also the second string and bringing it up to C. So now that I've already retuned, I'll go back to it. But one of the things I really like about this tuning is you get all these open. It's a little out of tune, but you get all these open, really easy chords that you can just kind of move up and down the neck. And then so also like you get all these like really nice drony things too. Because you have all these open strings, so
Right.
with that tune, one of the goals I had was kind of, trying to figure out how to use this tuning in a way where like the melody is very much on the first string, and there's some of it on the second string, but then the rest of it, everything else is kind of more like, like drony stuff.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I really love about the banjo, and I think a lot of other people love this too, and one of the things when I'm writing tunes, it's a lot of what I'm trying to think about is kind of, not necessarily like a fiddle tune type melody when I'm writing a tune, because, fiddle tunes write fiddle tunes, You know,
Mm-hmm.
I've written tunes like that, but the thing I find interesting is how to have a melody in the context of like rolls and banjo language, um, because that's kind of what attracted me to banjo in the first place was that kind of you know that droning sound, not necessarily like melodies. It was that big full sound that fills up a lot of space. Which that being said, you when you're playing banjo with people, you got to remember it's pretty loud and it does fill up a lot of space. So you got to keep that in mind so that the people you're playing with don't glare at you a little too much. But
Right,
yeah,
and these sort of like droney tunes also, you feel they work well when you're playing solo banjo as well versus something that's more like fiddle tune esque or more straight Scruggs esque sort of
yeah.
style.
Well, at least for me, it does. I think you can. There are guys who can just play a fiddle tune solo and you know the arrangement that they come up with and the tone that they get is so full that it's something that to me it's like it's enough.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas with me, it's like I've never felt like I can get that unless I'm adding the rolly notes. So like when I work up fiddle tunes or something, I try to get as much of the melody as I can, and it's really helpful to learn in melodic style or single string style the melody exactly as it is.
Mm-hmm.
But my goal when I'm coming up with an arrangement is usually, of something like that, is usually, you know, taking that melody and then figuring out what melody notes are the important ones and which ones can I turn into like banjo stuff,
Mm-hmm.
you know, um, because to me, like that's what I love about the banjo is it's that rolling thing, it's that filling the space, and I also just it that's kind of something that's enjoyable to me is figuring out how to put a melody into those rolls. And so like to relate this to like other tunings, like with that double C tuning, it becomes really easy to do that because you can kind of get the melody on one or two strings and then everything else is this rich full
Right.
thing underneath.
Yeah.
Like I think of it, it's like the bagpipes, except not quite as loud.
Right. Right. It's like when you play in like if you playing guitar and you do like a drop D tuning too, you get that sort
Hmm.
of same sort of vibe going.
Yeah, it kind of fills out the tone. Like if you're playing in the key of D, if you can drop that sixth string down to D, and then you just ram
Right.
into a D chord, it's this big thing.
Right. Yeah, you have this bass thing filling it out. Yeah.
Yeah, and with the banjo where we only have five strings, and the range isn't necessarily that wide,
Right.
um, putting it into different tunings where you have different notes, like lower notes on the fourth string. Sometimes you'll tune the inside strings lower. I always think banjos sound better when they're tuned low because everything's kind of more
You,
resonant.
yeah,
So
you
you
get
kind
more sustain and everything.
yeah, you kind of get more of that resonance. But I also, it's like I also just got sick of like trying to write tunes in G because it in G tuning because it's like, boy, is it hard to come up with something that no one's done before,
Right.
you
Exactly.
know. Um, but yeah, I think and I think another aspect of this is when I started to learn how to play. I started with clawhammer style
Okay.
originally. That wasn't what brought me to the banjo. I just didn't know the difference. Um, and nothing against clawhammer. I love clawhammer, and I still love playing clawhammer. But I kind of just assumed like, well, maybe if I do this quick enough, it'll sound like Earl Scruggs. Is what I
Right. Yeah.
heard.
Yeah.
And then I very quickly realized that's not how
Uh,
this works.
uh,
Um, but that was, I got introduced to other tunings really early on because if you're playing clawhammer, you're using a ton of different tunings.
mm-hmm.
And you know I've I've kind of forgotten a lot of them, but there are a few I still use, and mostly double C. You know, you can also, it's like there's one where it's like the bring this B string down to A, or you can have like B string up to C, but keep everything. It's like a modal tuning.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's like F tuning. There's a B flat tuning. I've been I was experimenting with, which I can't remember how to get the banjo in that tuning right now.
When you do the F tuning, are you doing that these days popular clawhammer tuning where it's like it's essentially G with the well, no,
It's
double C. It's double C with the G string tuned down to F. Is that what
yeah,
it is?
yeah. So it's called last chance tuning.
Yeah.
And the fifth string's tuned down as well. And then sometimes I'll tune the fourth string all the way down to B flat.
Okay.
Just because it's it sounds cool. It's an
It doesn't
interesting.
get too floppy down there.
Oh, it gets floppy, but I don't mind. It's interesting. Whenever I play like an E-tuned banjo, like if I tune my banjo
Mm-hmm.
low, I usually just have the same strings on it, and
Right.
it has this like floppy thing to it. And depending on how the banjo is set up too, like it can be a little too floppy.
Mm-hmm.
But there's just something I really like about that because I don't have to hit very hard at all.
Mm-hmm.
And it has so much sustain, and sustain to me is really really important for me. Like I I wish I could love banjos with like really quick note decay, but I just feel so much comfortable when I have a banjo where like that note lasts
Mm-hmm.
for a while. And, part of it is the way I set it up. Part of it is also that just the instruments I ended up gravitating towards all do that. Um, but when I have it tuned low with those normal strings, like you have to be careful to not hit it too hard because it can go out of tune. But if you can hit it softly and with the right touch, it's this huge sound that I really like.
Yeah.
That being said, I did string one of my banjos up with the Hartford string set, and it actually works a lot better. Uh, it's a lot easier to stay in tune and stuff. So, you know, but not that I'm tuning my banjo down that much these days.
Well, let's back up a little bit. How'd you get started? You're in the Boston area now. Are you from the Boston area originally?
Yeah, yeah. I was born here. I've never moved anywhere else. Thought about moving to Nashville at one point, but then you see all these incredible banjo players out there, and it's just like I don't want to have to compete with those guys. Those guys are too good. Um, but yeah, I was born in Boston, and the way I got into it was through NPR, through Car Talk.
Right.
So I had started playing piano. I think I was 5 years old or something, 6 years old. And I played for several years, and I really did not like it. It didn't make sense to me. And I really, for someone who plays banjo, I really have bad right hand, left hand coordination. So
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't like play the bass lines and
Right.
the melody lines at the same time. That being said, probably had I practiced more, had I not been like 5 years old, maybe I would have been a little better.
Right.
But I'd just go for these piano lessons and just end up hanging out with the piano teacher's dogs for like an hour. She had these amazing dogs. So when I decided I didn't like piano, um, my dad did that thing of like, well, I never played an instrument and I really regret it. So now you have to do it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, Dad, really? Come on. Dad, the classic like teenage like, oh, my parents are so not cool. Um, now I know that he's very cool, but so I had always loved the Car Talk theme song, but he had told
Right.
me you need to choose an instrument in 2 weeks or I'm choosing one for you. So he got me after 2 weeks. I hadn't decided, so he decided you're playing the vibraphone because it's similar to a piano. And so he got a starter set of vibes that was about like this big, and I
Yeah.
hit one note on it. And he's like, "We're not having that in the house." Granted, I'm sure he didn't know what was to come, but
Right.
so
Right.
he said, "All right, keep thinking about it." And I was about 15 at the time, I think maybe 14 or 15, and I just remember we were driving somewhere, and Car Talk came on the radio, and I just heard that,
Yeah.
and I was like, "Oh my God, what is that? What is that? I need to know
Right.
what that is, and I need to know how to do that." And I think it's this classic thing of when people hear Earl for the first time.
Right.
It's like it stops you, and it stops you in your tracks. It's a good thing I wasn't driving at the time because I was underage to be driving, but also I probably would have crashed the car. It was such a profound experience, and I remember it. My memory isn't that well of the past, but like I remember that really well, hearing Earl Scruggs and just thinking, "This is incredible. What is this?"
That's it. But who's playing it? That is Earl Scruggs. I know it's David Grisman that wrote that theme.
Yeah, so it's Earl Scruggs. They have two different recordings that they used. The original one was Earl. I don't know who the second one was, but
Okay.
both great banjo players. But the one I heard was Earl. And there's this thing about Earl where his playing is just so captivating.
Uh-huh.
And it's not just like his tone or timing. It's just musically who he was. There was just something about him that just really captivated me, and I mean, all the other three finger banjo players I've ever met. I don't know if I've ever met a three finger banjo player who's like Earl Scruggs, ugh, you
Right.
know, and someone's gonna isolate that and post it on YouTube and blackmail me, but
There's something about that with all great musicians, I think. Their personality comes through instantly. If you
yeah,
got B.B. King or Louis Armstrong or whatever, it's one note, and you're like,
exactly.
it's them. And
Yeah, and it's like Earl could have played anything and he would have been incredible, but he just found the banjo.
right,
So I heard that and I was like, I got to do this. I love that so much. So I got a Deering Good Time. Shout out to the Deerings. One of the open backs, with, I think they call it the Gumby headstock, one of the old ones.
yeah.
I still have it somewhere, though. At some point, when I was young, I pulled all the frets out of it because I'm like, I want a fretless banjo, and it turns out it didn't really work too well. So that's fine. We don't need to talk about
Had your Jaco Pastorius
my
banjo
yeah
moment.
my mistakes there, but and so I started taking lessons from my brother's guitar teacher who played clawhammer banjo. This guy Bill Bear, really sweet guy. Um, and after like must have been like 7 8 months, about a year, I was like, "Hey Bill, like, why isn't it sounding like this?" And he's like, "Oh, you wanted to play that style." And I'm like, "What do you mean style?" So then he told me, "Well, that's just a completely different thing. It's like a different instrument, basically." So he gave me some picks and started showing me some rolls. And then he was mainly a clawhammer guy, so I moved on to start taking lessons from this really great local musician named Howie Tarnower,
Okay.
um, who I loved taking lessons with Howie. He was all about learning by ear, and I'd go every week with a cassette tape, and he'd record what he
Hmm.
showed me onto the cassette tape. I didn't have a cassette player for a little while though, so it was, not
Built up a
necessarily.
library.
Yeah, but I learned so much from him, and I'm really thankful that he, wasn't just giving me
Right,
tabs.
right.
Um, I think tabs can be a really great thing, but the really difficult thing with learning three finger banjo is it's like a language. It's like you have these licks like you know
Right.
this, like this roll. Now imagine I were in tune, that roll, and then licks like this It's like that's the same right hand pattern, but it just doesn't sound anything like it. So I think one of the things with tabs, at least for me, is that I found that if I was working things out with tab, it was a lot harder to recognize the patterns and the rolls.
Totally. You're memorizing. It's like walking a path. Instead of like looking at your long way down the street, you're looking at each step in front of you, and so you never really get an idea of where you're going.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's like you can be learning from tab and play this like 500 times, and you might never be able to play that outside of that tab. Whereas if you learn that from listening to Earl by ear, you know that lick already. So when I teach people Scruggs style, and I know not everyone wants to play Scruggs style. Some people are like, I want to play melodic style, or I want to play single string style, or get away from me. I don't know who you are, style. Like, it's, I think that like one of the more important things is learning it as a language. So I tell people you should at some point be able to like listen to any Scruggs kickoff from like a studio record from like the early days and basically know how to play it, because you'll find all of these ones that have similar things. So like this kick, and then you have like so you hear some like similarities like this lick, and then there's like similar stuff there. So like when you start learning that vocabulary, not only do you know how to use it in that context, but you can start actually using it like just to improvise, so like if someone's like, here's a bluegrass song you don't know in the key of G, then okay, well, like licks like this and like or like all that works, and so with tablature, for me, I found that when I was working with it, it really helped me. And actually, I tell people to do this. When you're working with tablature and it's not like some melodic arrangement or single string arrangement, because with melodic and single string, especially melodic, it's like you don't necessarily have like set rolls, so to speak. Both Scruggs style, you can take those tabs and actually like take a pencil and start like putting parentheses around each lick or roll, and just kind of label what it is.
Right.
And I think it kind of takes a lot longer to learn banjo this way. But it's, at least in my opinion, it's a lot better just because you kind of learn it as like, a language. So it's like, it, you don't have to read it from a paper. So that's how he kind of taught me that was the way to do it. And then I started taking lessons from a great banjo player and luthier named Glenn Nelson, who started getting me more into melodic style and single string. And then I started discovering like Banjo Camp North and banjo camps. I met Pete Wernick really early on, and Pete was so generous with me. He let me come to some of his camps for free a few years in a row, which was really, for me at that age, was a really amazing experience to just go learn from Pete and with all these other people. And then, through Banjo Camp North and through local festivals, I started meeting all these other influences, like, Bruce Stockwell, he's in Vermont. He is this unbelievably great banjo player, that everyone should know. And then, guys like Mike Kropp and Ben Freed, who, both of those guys are sadly no longer with us, and, Bill Keith, all of these guys, Tony Trishka, Alan Mundy. I feel so fortunate that early on I got to sit with these guys at these camps and learn from them and pick their brain. And, I realize now more than ever just how lucky I am that, I had that access to these people, and that I was able to, especially at that time when I was absorbing things so quickly, be able to sit down with these guys and just kind of sit there and take in what they were saying.
About how old were you during these years that you're going to these camps, and was being around people like this part of what could keep you going through the plateaus of learning, where you kind of hit these plateau spots and where you want to keep pushing forward and you don't just kind of get lazy?
Absolutely. So I was probably, this was like 16 through 18 or something.
Yeah.
And granted, I'd still go to the camps and stuff and the festivals and everything as I got older. But, as I got into college and then started touring in a band after college, it sometimes got harder to go to these things. But it was definitely an inspiration and refreshing to kind of go get to sit with these people whose styles are also massively different.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I would take little things from each of these people, and put them into my playing, or just like being able to hear just how they approach the instrument was so inspiring. So I really looked forward to being able to go to these camps and be like, hey, this is what I've been working on, or like, check out this lick I've been working on, and then they might be like, get away from me, you crazy kid, but no, they're all very, very nice. But it really inspired me to just kind of keep playing and to learn more and more, and to just really like find my own sound.
Yeah.
And I think I had a few different people, who inspired me to kind of stop trying to necessarily copy other people. And I remember I had a lesson with Jens Kruger at his house once. This was many years ago. My dad and I were down there looking at a college, which I didn't end up going to. And so I used it as an excuse to go visit Jens, which also just like, at that age, it's like, wow, like Jens Kruger trusts me enough for, to give me his phone number so I can, go get a lesson from him. But I remember at the end of that lesson, he saw that I was trying to copy stuff he was doing. He saw I was trying to copy stuff Bela, Tony, all these guys were doing.
Mm-hmm.
And he kind of just said, like, you have a lot of music inside of you, and like, you shouldn't try to copy these other guys because you'll never be as good at it as they are. And I love that phrase. You'll never be as good at it as they are, because they're them.
Yeah.
It's their musicality coming out through the instrument. So of course it's like, if you're trying to sound like Tony all the time, it's like you're never going to be happy because it's like, why don't I sound like Tony? It's like, well, because you're not Tony.
Right.
You're probably not as nice as Tony either. So for me, that was a really big turning point of, okay, I've kind of got to start figuring out what I want to sound like as a banjo player. And I was very fortunate, two of those guys I mentioned, Mike Kropp and Ben Freed, they're two banjo players from around here. Mike was from Rhode Island and Ben was in New York. And they both had very unique sounds and very unique styles. Ben played with a lot of bounce, very bright poppy, and a lot of syncopation. And Mike would do all these things he called voomph. So he'd, like,
Yep.
That was a terrible example. And he'd play cool licks like slidey licks like... no, that wasn't good. And they'd like, but, well,
Right.
So those guys also really inspired me because I was like, that kind of made me realize, okay, I don't need to try to sound like Earl Scruggs. I don't need to try to sound like Bela.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need to sound like any of these people, it's good to take inspiration from them,
Right.
but it's also really important to think about what you want out of your playing. So, since then, I've become a lot happier with how I play because I'm not comparing myself to the unobtainable.
Right. You're not chasing this thing that's you can never achieve, basically.
Yeah, and I think also, one of the things people get really impatient when they're learning.
Mm-hmm.
And I was definitely like that at one point, and it was just like, no, I want to be better. I want to be better. But then, you just have to kind of accept, well, you don't get better overnight. It takes discipline and serious work, and also sometimes working on stuff that's super duper boring.
Mm-hmm.
So like, sometimes just sitting there like this, and doing that with a metronome. Just running these rolls can be really helpful. Um, but a lot of people want to go straight from that to like they're like, all right, now that I've mastered the alternating thumb roll, let's learn Big Country by Bela Fleck.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, that's got a few more rolls in it.
Right,
So
right.
so I think for me too, just becoming more realistic with where I was and what my level was too at the time was really important. And even now there's stuff that I know that I'm probably never going to be able to play, just because I, well, I don't have the time to practice it, but also, you know, my brain doesn't work in ways like, maybe Gnomes does,
Mm-hmm.
you know, where he's connecting all of these scales and everything, where I'm the way my brain works, I'm playing a lot more out of like positions.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I mean, it's that. I guess that was a very long-winded way, of saying, those camps, and just those people that who, the ones who are still living, I still, love them dearly, and whenever I see them, I still love sitting with them, and learning from them. Whenever I see Alan, it's like you know, Alan Mundy, it's like I'm a kid in the candy store again. I'm just like, oh man, that lick, I love that lick, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and it's just I'm so lucky that I was able to be there. And also that, I in high school, I was a very shy kid. I was not really very social at all. Um, and somehow the banjo just made me a lot more confident, in being social. So I was like a lot more confident about talking to these people, you know. So it was a very interesting change for me. Um,
Yeah, one
you
of the
know,
great things about the banjo community is that these people you look up to are so approachable versus if it was, in another, parts of the entertainment industry, not so necessarily.
yeah, and most of them are just super friendly people who don't have any egos at all.
Right.
Of course, you're gonna run into some people, who are difficult, but like for the most part, all of my heroes who I've ever had a chance to sit with and talk to, it's just like mind blowing. It's like here I am, a nobody, some kid from Boston, you know, playing a Deering good time, or at that point I might have had a Deering golden era, um, and these guys are taking the time, giving me the time of day,
Yeah,
to teach me some lick I'm curious about,
totally.
um, and
Well,
I
do you want
still,
to?
sorry,
Sorry to cut you off. Go ahead.
no, that's okay.
Do
No,
you
I
want
mean,
to play something else?
yeah, sure, I can do that. So I'll play another original tune. So I so like I said, I've been trying to write a lot of tunes, and like I said, it's hard to write tunes in G. So I decided that was a project. I'm gonna try and write a tune in G tuning. Um, that sounds
But
interesting. So I was in Nashville for this thing, Banjo-thon.
okay.
which is a gathering of all these people with old Gibson banjos, and you just go and they're all in a room and you look at them and drool on them, and then the next day it's as if nothing ever happened. And then I was staying with a friend and doing a recording session. In the morning, I was supposed to fly out. So a month before this, I had my deviated septum fixed.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's too much information for Deering Live, but I'm
Think
bearing
we're
bearing my soul to you all. So, I'd had some, they had corrected that, and I'll tell you, being able to go like this, it's pretty great. Don't take it for granted. But
Okay.
anyway, I started feeling some drips from my nose that morning, and I'm like, oh man, snot. But then it was blood, and I'm like, oh boy.
Oh,
And it turned out to be, I won't go into detail, but it was like I was bleeding for something like 6 hours.
oh.
And I had to go to urgent care. And the nurse or the doctor there said something you never want to hear a doctor say, which is, I've never done this before. And then I went to the ER. They dealt with it. They put a balloon up my nose. It was great. I stayed for an extra day. Everyone had a great time. But anyway, why do I bring up this story? Because I wrote this tune about that, and it's called Drip Drip Die. Let's see if I can get through it. Well,
Those are for some fast drips of blood coming out there.
yeah. Oh, it was. It was not slow. Yeah, and I'll tell you. Let me tell you something. Until you've had a balloon up your nose for 24 hours, you haven't really lived.
Okay, everybody, you heard it here. We have a question from Victor Coco, saying, Gabe, when did you feel like playing the banjo just flowed easily?
Oh, geez. Never. No. That actually that's a really good question. I I can't remember like a very specific moment, but I seem to remember it was like around 8 or 9 years in. I didn't necessarily have to think as much,
Mm-hmm.
and like autopilot really started to kick in. But a really big part of, and it's not like I was like really tense playing before that. Um, but I think that comfort and that flow really comes with just muscle memory and really knowing what you're playing really well. So like, if I'm improvising, at a really fast tempo or something, most of the stuff I'm playing is stuff I already know how to play.
Right.
You know, um, so like really the secret, and people really hate that this is the secret, is that you just got to play slowly, and learn that, like, learn it like a language, like I said.
Mm-hmm.
So like learn how to just do this. Chord rolls. And then you can start putting in stuff like to get to a C, or you can just start so starting with just these simple things, and really just nailing them, getting them into your muscle memory, and really knowing them. And it's that thing where it's like, it so well that you can just do it without necessarily thinking about it.
Right.
Now, I'd say, like, it really also depends on what I'm playing. So like if I'm playing Scruggs style, it flows really easily for me because I know that style really, really well. I've played it a lot. I've been playing probably like 19 or 20 years at this point. Um, is that right? Yeah, geez, wow. I should stop telling people I've only been playing for 10 years. Um, People are like, "How long have you been playing?" It's like, I don't know, like 10 years, but now it's been 20. Oof. Life, what a cruel mistress. But anyway, so that flow comes from just knowing it. You know, so if I need to work out some like super intense melodic arrangement or single string arrangement or some crazy lick, it's like it's only gonna flow, you know, as well as I prepare. So, the answer to that is kind of, getting it into your muscle memory, really practicing it slowly, to the point where you know exactly what the patterns you want to play are, and also feeling the time. So, like, playing with a metronome, and feeling that, like, one, or you can do different subdivisions, but, like, having a solid sense of where that beat is also makes it flow better. And it also helps if you want to decide to play bouncy or straight. So that's like the difference between like straight, which is, or bouncy, which is like, and that might be a little more.
Is there a way for
bouncy.
like the bouncy straight thing, especially for people starting out? Is there one that you point people in the direction to do? Often I find when beginners, when they're playing slow, they add that bounce to it a lot of the time.
Yeah, I definitely noticed that too. And, I mean, I think it really depends on what, what they want to hear.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, there's nothing wrong with playing with bounce. Some of my favorite banjo players play with a lot of bounce. Like if you don't like Doug Dillard's bounce, then you can just, get out of here. But, I think, learning how to play straight time can be very helpful because then you can add the bounce later.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think it's really important, to play what you really want to hear.
Mm-hmm.
I think, if I'm teaching a student and they're coming back and they're not making progress, I kind of sometimes I'll reevaluate and it's like, all right, maybe they don't really want to play, you know, boil them cabbage down,
Right.
even though it's good for them. It's like, maybe let's try something else. But I think that with straight time or bouncy time, it's just all about the feel you want to have, and also it's like what banjo players are your heroes?
Mm-hmm.
Who are the people who really, like, when you hear them, you just think like, oh yeah, that's it.
Right. I want to do that.
Yeah, so for me, it's like I like both. Um, and it's very interesting because I'll find myself kind of like I'll have like weeks where I'm just playing bouncy, and then all of a sudden I'll just start playing straight again. And I don't know if it's who I'm playing with or just like what I'm listening to. Um, but I don't know, it just happens. But you know, that question is a really good question. You know, when does it flow?
Hmm.
Um, and I think it's going to be different for everyone. It's just about really putting the time in, to learn all that stuff.
And what about when you're hitting, like, you're mentioning playing slow, but people want to play fast. They want to start playing fast. And what if they're hitting they can do it slow, but they can't get over a certain hump to play quicker, even if they're pretty good and they're getting, they can play pretty quick, but they can't play really quick. It just always kind of falls apart at a certain time. How do you kind of get them to get over that, wherever that hump is for each player?
Oh, you get the whip. No, so that's a question I get asked a lot. Um, and so I had a really wonderful professor at Berklee College of Music, this guy John McGann, um, tragically passed too soon, but he had a phrase that I tell people, which is, in order to play fast, play slow, because playing fast is like playing slow, only faster.
Hmm.
So it's not like you're going to get fast just by playing slow, but the way to do it is to find what is my comfort zone. So you can do this with a metronome, and you set it like where you're comfortable, and you play the thing you want to play. And once you can do it without thinking, you set that beat, you know, two, three, four, however many beats higher, and then you keep doing that. And
Hmm.
you incrementally, slowly make it faster and faster and practice it until you have it as fast as you want.
Hmm.
And, one of the things Bela said to me when I last time I saw him was when he's preparing something and practicing with a metronome, sometimes he'll actually prepare it faster uh, than it's supposed to be, because when you're on stage, everyone's got adrenaline going. It might happen to be
Yeah.
faster, so it's good to kind of prepare for that. So it's all about kind of doing that slow incremental practice. And it's, I know people want some sort of magical answer of, like, drink a Gatorade at 3:45 a.m., once every other Tuesday. um but unfortunately, that's not how it works. I wish
Mm,
that were how it works.
too bad. Yeah.
Probably be a little more hydrated if that were the case. But I think I think it's really great to really take that time. Um, but yeah, I mean, to play fast, it's all about just slowly building that speed and making sure you're comfortable at every increment.
Yeah. Yeah. We've got a
Yeah,
bunch of questions coming in. I do want to start to get them to them. We have
yeah, sure.
Jujito is from Brazil and says, "What advice do you have for people like me, a banjo player from Brazil who doesn't have many opportunities to play with other people?"
Oh, that's a good question. Playing with people is, a really great thing to be able to learn. Um, but I always, when I was not in a situation where I could play with people, I would always find records
Hmm.
that I really love and play along with them. You can also, like, there's Music Minus One.
Right.
Pete Wernick has these jam DVDs. There's another great one is I don't know if it's still around, but there's like it's like the flat pick, like flat, some sort of, the acoustic guitar flat pick blog. I wish I could remember what it was called, but it was this flat picker would record rhythm tracks for all these tunes, and he'd do it slow, medium, and fast.
Hmm.
And that's just you're having guitar backing tracks, so it's not like you're playing with a full band. But the other thing I'd say is, if you have the time, if you have the means, like, try to find festivals to go to. There are a lot of great festivals. There are some overseas from here as well that are really wonderful. There's La Roche in France. I think there's one called Alras. I think that might be happening right now.
Yeah,
Um,
in Spain. Yeah.
yeah, but you can also, if you can, come over here. Oh yeah, Clooney's drum machine is great too. Yeah, hey Clooney. Um, but yeah, I mean, if you can get over to the United States during festival season and just like have like a few weeks where you just go to different festivals,
Yeah.
there's jamming all over the place. And I know it's like coming from Brazil, it's not like, oh, I'm just gonna get in a plane and go to Gray Fox Bluegrass Festival or something.
Right.
Um, but if you can make it happen, or IBMA, IBMA
Right.
it is incredible. It's everyone's there, everyone is playing all night. Um, and then there's another thing, I think, Band in a Box or something.
Yeah,
But
Band and Box, an old one. Yeah.
basically like finding festivals that you can get to, and also finding records you love to play along with. Like the Bluegrass Album Band records, those are super fun to play along with. Because
So do you not choose when you're playing along with records? You don't. I know it's common. A lot of people choose records that don't have banjo on it. Like Tony Rice's Manzanita album is a famous one for a lot of people. Do you choose ones without banjo, or does it really not really matter for you?
not necessarily. Certainly it like gives you more of the vibe of like being a part of the music if there's not like JD Crow
Right.
playing there, and
Getting in
also
your way.
yeah, it's like, hey JD, get out of here. But well, and it's also like, oh man, I am not even worthy to be playing along with JD Crow, let alone be listening to JD Crow. But um not, yeah, I mean, it doesn't necessarily bother me to have banjo there. um it still gives me that thing of like practicing what it's like to play with people. And
Hmm.
obviously nothing is going to be like getting a group of people together
Right.
and just hanging out and having a good time and playing. But if you're limited in that area, then it's totally fine to play with recordings.
Right.
And I think a lot of people would prefer playing with recordings, you know these days. But um,
Um, let's see. We have some more questions. We have a question. Well, this isn't a question, but just more of a comment. Clooney McPherson says, "BC misses you. When are you going to come to your senses and quit your day job and come back?"
oh, I wish Clooney. I miss BC too. British Columbia. We in my band, the Lonely Heartstring Band, our fiddle player Patrick is from out there, so we would tour out there,
Nice.
once or twice a year. And it's just, I mean, coming from living in Boston, it's like another universe out there. It's so beautiful. No offense to Boston, so if anyone's listening from Boston, forgive me. Um, but yeah, well, I have no plans to quit my job yet, but I would love to make it back out there at some point. I love it out there, and the music scene out there is just, some of those people are such wonderful folks, Clooney included, of course, and his beautiful Scruggs banjo he has, that he very very kindly let me play all night at a jam once. Um, so thank you for that.
Let's see. We have Chun C Lee is saying earlier. Gabe said he connects positions as opposed to scales like Gnome. Do you write your tunes riffs based off of positions and where it lies on the neck?
Oh, that's a good question. So it really depends. I will like usually for me writing a tune, it's like I'll come up with a basic melody. So like with that one, if we're talking about that one I just played, we have that came from this lick. So like in that position. So this position connects to like this kind of, you could have this like A minor or F, and then this position. So you have that A root there. So like, so I have that melody of, and I'm filling in that space. and then. So what is that? That is kind of a transitional phrase because I'm going to a C chord there. So I know that I can have this shape, that position, which you can do all sorts of stuff with that. You know, that is terrible, but that kind of thing. So I'm like, and then I have, which is kind of like you're going into Scruggs style. So for me, the shapes are more like up the neck. So like with shapes, with single string, you have these like box shapes, which, you know, it's still scalar stuff. It's all part of scales, but I'm just containing it more and thinking of it more, you know, in a contained way. You know, so like it's still good to learn, you know, that, like this G scale. You can play that like that too, but you know, for me, like my little finger curls inward, so it's like hard to do some of those stretches. So I like kind of those like some of these like smaller shapes, so that I'm just contained to this box, and then you can move that around. So like, so you know that like this is going to work over a G or like a D or something, and this that'll work over G and like C, you know, and other stuff too. But when it comes to writing tunes, it either comes from a shape I'm working on, you know, like I'll be sitting there like, you know, playing like something like that. And it's like, oh, that's a cool shape. So if I move that down here, so you have that melody, which when you put it by itself sounds kind of like stupid. But when you put rolls in it in these positions, and it's hard to play this on, this is a very like bluegrassy banjo with a flat fingerboard, but so like you can take these shapes and connect them, you know, and it really, one of the shapes I really like are sixths. So like in the key of G, you have these. So what that is, it's an interval of a sixth from the third string to the first string. So like if you take this chord, you know, the scale, and then let's just, for the sake of bluegrass, this is D again, and G, because we don't want to deal with what's going on there in academic music. But so if you take just the third string and the first string, you get this harmonized thing. So a lot of my tunes, I'll use those to like get around, and then sometimes you can like connect things with like by fretting the fifth string. But
are you fretting the fifth string? You're fretting the fifth string basically 2 frets behind where the first string would be.
Oh, it depends on the shape. So like here, like in this G, you can fret it at the 7th fret, and you know, I'm fretting with the thumb. Some people like to fret with the index finger or other fingers. You know, it's all personal preference. You know, so like that's a cool thing. But with these sixths, with these 2 simple rolls, so middle index, thumb index, or thumb index, middle index, you can do this. And so this, like, for tune writing, this can be great to get around, you know. And I mean, that's not a tune I wrote, that's just like some idea, but because you can get this melody, you know. So that'd be, which isn't the most, you know, great melody in the world, but you're filling it in with these positions, you know, these sixth positions. So this can also be great for improvising. So like if you're playing like, you know, Shucking the Corn or something. And
Yeah.
when people learn this thing, they go crazy with it. So don't overuse anything. But yeah, so I'm thinking out of like chord shapes basically a lot of the times.
Okay.
So like this, it's like I'm thinking of G or it's like E minor. Just thinking about chord shapes more than scales. And it's not because like I didn't learn my scales. It's just because I have trouble for some reason connecting them. Um,
Right.
Maybe I didn't practice them enough, or maybe my brain just doesn't work that way, unfortunately. Um, which my brain hasn't been working a lot of ways uh, recently, if you know what I'm saying. Um, but yeah, I mean, so tune writing, it either comes from messing with shapes, or I'll just find a lick or an idea that will come into my head, and then I'll try to build from it. So like it was maybe like 2 days ago or something. I wrote a tune or an outline of a tune where the melody. So then you add to that, like, so like, and you have that space, so you can add these harmonies, chords, then make this full chord shape. So, knowing, coming up with the melody sometimes first can help, and then
Mm-hmm.
adding chords and rhythms, uh, and stuff. And it also helps to know how chords like connect to each other. So, like,
Mm-hmm.
one thing that can be really helpful is like knowing that if you have this G chord here, knowing how to make an E minor out of that, or knowing how to make like a G minor out of that,
Right.
knowing, or like voice leading.
Yeah, we should do a whole Deering live on kind of connecting with you on connecting chords and
Yeah,
voice leading. Kind of that'd be a great episode.
yeah. So like knowing how to do that can be super duper helpful. Especially on like slower tunes when you're playing a lot of chords. And I like using a lot of like voicings like that.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that my little finger doesn't like it. And I really had because I have trigger finger in this finger and my little finger, and I'm not gonna do it. I don't want anyone at home to puke, but um, it took a lot of practice to kind of make my hands work. So there are just some things like this lick, that thing that everyone does, and is that like it's like one of the things if you're playing banjo up the neck, that's like a position that you kind of have to be able to play. And for
Yeah.
me, that's one of the hardest positions to make on the banjo.
It hurts. It doesn't work for your hand as well.
Oh, it doesn't hurt. It's hard to like get it. You
Yeah.
know, um, we can't all have Tony Trishka's little finger, which I don't know if you've ever watched him. And
Double jointed, isn't it?
yeah, so he can like bend that,
Yeah.
just that first knuckle.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like, oh man, if I could do that, I'd be
You'd be Tony Turchka.
I'd be a millionaire or something. But I don't know. Um, but yeah,
What
yeah.
I,
No, go ahead.
I want to get to a few things that you're up to because we're up over the hour, and
Okay, yeah, sure.
so you do a lot of banjo setup in the Boston area, right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
how can people get in touch with you and do you just do local people? Do you ever have people send in their instruments to you?
I get a lot of people asking me if they can send their instruments, and I don't like to do that. First of all, because the cost is insane
Mm-hmm.
for them,
Right.
and there's also the risk of damage during shipping. But I also just think that the shipping process kind of like undoes some of the
Right.
setups, the finer setup stuff, And so like whenever I get a banjo, and I buy and sell instruments. I mean, not quite as much right now. Now I do more like consignment stuff. But the first thing I usually do when I get a banjo and shipped to me is I just set it up, because
Hmm.
even if it sounds pretty good and it's working pretty good, I'm figuring that at some point in the shipping process it was probably jolted around a bit. So I'll just do the setup anyways. So I I generally like it for people to come bring the banjo to me, and then I usually keep it for a few days or a week. If it needs a new head, I usually like to keep it for a little longer, because you put a new head on one of these things, they stretch out for a long time. So it's like you put the head on, you make it sound good, and then they get home, and like a few days later, it's like, hey, Gabe, my banjo sounds all muddy. What's the deal? You prick, you cheating me out of my money, And then you say, well, no, it's a plastic head, it's a new Remo, so it's gonna, stretch out, and some of them stretch out for like months. And not that I keep people's banjos for months, I'll keep it like a week or two at most. Um, but so like you know, I don't like to take banjos shipped in just for setup, just because like shipping is crazy expensive these days. Um, I don't want to have a situation where someone's banjo gets lost or damaged. Um, and
Yeah,
quite frankly, I don't have time to like go to UPS
totally, totally.
all the time. But you can get in touch with me through my Facebook or my Instagram.
Okay,
I'm, you know, I'm very, very good about replying to messages. Um, Sometimes it'll take me a couple of days, but I'm pretty good at checking them and being up to date with getting back to people.
cool. And then you're taking in a lot of students too in the area, and or do you teach online as well?
I do both in person and online. I'm not taking like a ton of students, but I do like to teach. Really, one of the things I like to do a lot is I like to give one-off lessons to people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because I think a lot of the stuff I have to say is stuff that with two or three lessons, that's like they'll get
A lot of
a
lot of
lot of the
stuff to
stuff
work on,
that they
right?
need. Yeah, and often with students, a lot of what I talk about is like right hand and left hand technique, and then also just like telling them, learn these basics first. I know you want to be able to play all this hard stuff, but it's not like you can play that stuff without learning how to play that stuff,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense. So yeah, I like teaching, um, and so if anyone wants a lesson, you can get in touch. Um, with my day job as a counselor, it's I'm usually
Schedule's a little tight, yeah.
busy during the week, but I can fit you in. Um, but yeah, I'm around. I'm
Great.
alive for now. You know.
Well, this has been great. Clooney just chimed in again, asking for you to do an online setup workshop thing. So we'll have to get you on Daring Live and just again and do, as well as talking about the harmonic thing we were talking about, but also doing a setup show.
Hmm.
That'd be great.
Yeah, and I think usually when I tell people, talk to people about setup, I like to tell people how to do it, without needing to measure anything or without
Uh-huh.
needing like too many tools, because that's the thing that creeps people out. It's
Right.
like when you're like your action needs to be this high and your tailpiece needs to be this high, and your flumbus needs to be all over the place. People are like, well, I don't even know how to adjust my flumbus, so I don't know what I'm going to do here. But once you get it down, it's super easy. I mean, I guess I shouldn't be saying that because people
You're
pay me,
giving
but
me.
like once you get used to taking them apart and putting them back together again, it comes more to just like figuring out what each individual banjo needs, because they're not all the same. So
Yeah, you have to learn to use your ear and your the feel and everything,
for sure, yeah.
and definitely get over that fear of taking it apart and that you can get it back together. That it's not just going to stay there.
Yeah, that was something. So there was a time when I had my banjo apart, probably like multiple times a week, Because I was just trying tail pieces, trying different heads,
Right.
different strings, all sorts of stuff. And at this point now, like if someone's like, "What does a Kirshner tailpiece sound like?" You
You
know,
got that information.
I can tell them pretty
Right.
confidently it's gonna sound like this. You know, or if someone's like, "I want a big open sound," will this Kirshner tailpiece do that if I crank it down? I'll be like, "No, you don't want any part of that." You
Right,
know,
right.
so I had to do that because there was really no one around here that did setup work, and so it's like when my neck would bow forward or something, it was like, well, I can't play, you know,
Right, right.
or it's harder to play. And then as soon as you figure out how to do it, it's like, you know, as the seasons change, you just make little adjustments, or if you need to change a head, it's not like a big ordeal.
Mm-hmm.
Which the first time you do it, it's kind of like, oh God, what if I lose a nut or a screw or something?
Right, totally.
Yeah, but
Well,
yeah,
this has been great. Would you want to play us out with something?
sure, yeah, yeah. Thanks for having me. Let's see, I'll just play a Scruggs tune. Why not? I'll play a Doggy Mountain Breakdown because that's what got me into it.
Yeah.